Hello, State House volunteers, tour guides, and gift shop attendants. This is Jack Zylinga coming at you from social distancing here. As you probably all are well aware, we were to have had within the last couple weeks here our kickoff luncheon to get ready for the season. Obviously, with the world that we're in right now, that was not a possibility, but I was actually scheduled to be the speaker that day to talk a bit about the project that we put together over the last summer and fall, and opened up here early in 2020, Women in the State House, the beautiful exhibit that is set up down under the east staircase in the State House lobby. And I do still want to be able to share that information with you guys. So we're going to do this in a little bit different way. And I'm going to be doing some elements of my talk via video that you can watch at your convenience here. Now this is just kind of an introduction, and I will do 3 or 4 hopefully relatively short but certainly informative videos about the exhibit and the process we went through, and kind of talk about what's in there. When we went through the process, when David and I started looking at this as kind of the next iteration of our continued efforts to better show those groups that maybe haven't had as much of not necessarily even a voice, but certainly haven't had a lot of a presence in the State House. And it is everybody's State House. It should belong to all Vermonters. It's something where we want to have those Vermonters from all walks of life on display somewhere where they can be appreciated as well, and people can come into the building and say, hey, there are people here like me, or who look like me, or who I might aspire to be like. So on the heels of our Abenaki display, our next goal was to capture the experience and the in conjunction with the centennial of women's suffrage of women in the State House. So it is a fairly narrow focus, as all things for the most part are in the State House, focusing on things that happen in that building or related to that building. What we did is once we started research, I was kind of the person who took the lead on that. Some of you may know, many of you probably don't. I have a master's from UVM in history, and my thesis was actually called Issues of the Hearth, Women's Impact on Politics in Vermont from 1840 to 1940. So I looked at some of these pieces that would become elements of this exhibit through my research over about 1.5 years or 2 years in writing that thesis and researching it. Everything from the suffrage movement to the first 20 years is what I looked at of women able to serve in state and national government, and looking at what women did between 1920 and 1940 in the State House. And so I was able to build from that for some of the research, and then go from there to build on further. Throughout the process, we worked with a group of 4 female academics who have a specialty in women's history. One was Melanie Gustafson at the University of Vermont, who was actually my advisor for my thesis and while I was in graduate school up there a number of years ago. Also Karen Madden at Northern Vermont University at Johnson, who was very helpful. Amy Morseman at Middlebury College, as well as Marilyn Blackwell here in Central Vermont, who is a very well-known historian at many levels, in particular with women's history. And we wanted to, again, this was the appropriate time, the right time to put this exhibit together in conjunction with the centennial of women's suffrage. We also had great partners, as we often do in these sorts of things, with Shadows and Light Design, who did all the design work and helped pull those exhibits together physically. Did a phenomenal job there as well. There are 3 sections, 3 panels on the Women in the State House exhibit, as many of you have probably seen, hopefully seen, or will see at some point when we're all able to get back safely into the building. And what I'm going to plan to do here is I'll give you a segment for each that kind of gives an overview of what's on there and a little bit more information perhaps than what you actually see on the panel. One of the big challenges we had is there's a lot of great information about events, about individuals, and you can only fit so much onto these panels in terms of text, and you want to have a lot of rich photographs as well and images that people can appreciate and draw people in. So we did have a challenge. I started out with a lot more words than ever ended up on those exhibit panels there. We did a ton of editing over and over and over again to get it down to what was the right amount of text, which in some cases meant other text was moved to other places. For instance, the Edna Beard, Consuelo Bailey, and Madeleine Kunin portraits now have additional text next to them, which initially was done to try and fit into the panels. When that wasn't going to be possible, it was a great opportunity for us just to provide more text right with those pieces of art. So when you're going through the building, you'll see that there's a little bit more context to their experiences and why they're important, why they're on the walls of our building. But there were a lot of pieces that we just couldn't fit in there that were interesting, that were great, but just couldn't go in there. So I may try and delve into some of that with all of you as well. So the three panels are Votes for Women, which kind of looks at giving you a history of the suffrage movement in Vermont, and at least one key figure in that, Clarina Howard Nichols. And that at least gives you some context in terms of the long struggle for suffrage that women had, specifically to Vermont. Again, this is women in the Vermont State House that we're talking about here. And the middle panel is called Political Pioneers, that highlights some of the pioneers of women's politics here in the State House. And then the last one is Women Gain Power, that looks at the last, let's say, 50 or 60 years of history in the State House, where the number of women serving in positions in the legislature and state government dramatically rise, and as we'll talk about, are well above, have been and continue to be well above the national average. So that's my goal here. Is I wanted to first say hello, to let you know that we miss you guys and can't wait to see you at some point when it's safe for us and all to do that, but also to just give you an introduction to let you know what my plan is to kind of go through some or most of what you would have heard from me at the luncheon that we can't do that way, but we will do this way. So stay tuned. There will be at least 3 other videos that will come out that are going to give you a little bit more information and a better sense of what is in our exhibits.